The sound of Marco's laughter cut through the warm evening air of his family's dining room, followed by rapid Italian that I wasn't supposed to understand. Guarda come mangia, come una contadina che non ha mai visto cibo vero. Look at how she eats, like a peasant who's never seen real food. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. His brothers erupted in laughter, wiping tears from their eyes as I carefully twirled my spaghetti alle vongole, keeping my expression pleasantly neutral. His mother, Giuliana, smiled indulgently at her sons from the head of the table, adding her own commentary. È così americana? Probabilmente pensa che Olive Garden sia cucina italiana autentica. She's so American, she probably thinks Olive Garden is authentic Italian cuisine. More laughter. I reached for my wine glass, a beautiful Brunello di Montalcino that I knew cost at least €200, and took a measured sip. The irony was exquisite. I'd spent 11 years in Italy, 4 in Florence studying Renaissance art history, 3 in Rome working at the Vatican museums, and another 4 in Milan consulting for luxury fashion houses. I'd eaten in Michelin-starred restaurants where the waiters knew my name, learned to make fresh pasta from a nonna in Tuscany, and could distinguish between regional dialects from Lombardy to Sicily. But Marco didn't know that. Nobody at this table knew that. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. 6 months ago, when I met Marco Bernardini at a tech conference in Boston, I'd made a calculated decision. After my last relationship ended with my ex trying to leverage my connections in the art world for his failing gallery, I'd decided to try something different. When Marco asked about my background, I'd given him the simplified version. Small-town girl from Ohio, state school education, working a modest job in marketing. I drove a 3-year-old Honda, wore mall brands, and played the part of someone uncultured, unsophisticated, and easily impressed by his family's old money, Boston Italian heritage. The truth was more complicated. My maternal grandmother had been Italian, from a small village near Siena. She'd moved to Ohio after the war, married my grandfather, but never lost her language or her culture. She'd raised me speaking Italian from birth, filling our house with the sounds of opera and the smells of proper ragu that simmered for hours. When she died and left me a substantial inheritance, money my parents never knew about, I'd used it to fund my education abroad, building a career and a life that I'd carefully hidden when I returned to the States. Marco, tua fidanzata non beve molto, his uncle Roberto observed, gesturing at my nearly full wine glass. Marco, your fiancé doesn't drink much. È probabilmente una di quelle ragazze che si ubriaca con 2 bicchieri, Marco replied with a smirk. She's probably one of those girls who gets drunk on 2 glasses. His cousin Antonio leaned in, lowering his voice but not enough. Sei sicuro di volerla sposare? Sembra così semplice. Are you sure you want to marry her? She seems so simple. Marco's answer made my grip tighten imperceptibly on my fork. Non è per sempre. Una bella ragazza americana, facile da gestire. Fra qualche anno, quando avrò quello che mi serve dalla sua azienda, possiamo sempre trovare una soluzione. It's not forever. A pretty American girl, easy to manage. In a few years, when I get what I need from her company, we can always find a solution. There it was. The confirmation of what I'd begun to suspect over the past month. Marco's sudden interest in my marketing job, at what he thought was a small firm. His questions about connections, about clients, about the ownership structure. He didn't know that the modest marketing position was a cover, that I actually own the boutique agency that had recently landed contracts with 3 major Italian fashion houses looking to expand in the American market. Contracts worth millions. Contracts that Marco, with his struggling import-export business, would kill to access. I smiled sweetly at him across the table, playing the oblivious American girlfriend. "Is everything okay? You all seem to be having such a great time." "Just talking about the family business," Marco said smoothly in English, reaching over to pat my hand condescendingly. "Nothing that would interest you, amore." Juliana stood, beginning to clear plates. I moved to help, but she waved me off. "No, no, cara. Tu sei l'ospite." "You're the guest." But as she passed behind me, I heard her mutter to Marco's sister, Sofia. "Almeno è carina da guardare, anche se non ha cervello." At least she's pretty to look at, even if she has no brain. Sofia giggled, collecting wine glasses. "Hai visto le sue scarpe? Probabilmente le ha comprate da Target." "Did you see her shoes?" "She probably bought them at Target." The shoes in question were actually vintage Ferragamo, purchased from a small boutique in Florence that I'd frequented for years, but I'd carefully scuffed them up and removed the obvious branding. Just like the inexpensive dress I wore was actually a sample piece from an emerging Milan designer I'd mentored, altered to look off the rack. I followed the women into the kitchen, playing my part. The kitchen was enormous, clearly recently renovated with top-of-the-line appliances. Through the window, I could see the manicured grounds of their Beacon Hill brownstone. Old money, or at least the appearance of it. My research had been thorough. The Bernardini family had been wealthy once. Truly wealthy. But Marco's grandfather had made poor investments in the 80s. Now they were living on fumes and real estate, maintaining appearances while the actual money dwindled. Marco's import business was struggling, sustained only by his mother's dwindling trust fund and the sale of family assets. "Sofia, guarda come tiene il piatto, come se non avesse mai aiutato in una cucina," Juliana commented as I carefully rinsed a dish. "Sofia, look at how she holds the plate, like she's never helped in a kitchen." I bit back a smile, remembering the cooking classes I'd taken in Bologna, the week I'd spent in a professional kitchen in Emilia-Romagna learning traditional techniques. Instead, I fumbled slightly with the dish soap, playing clumsy. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I said in English, steadying a wine glass. "I'm not very good at this." "È ovvio," Sofia muttered. "It's obvious." Juliana patted my shoulder with barely concealed condescension. "You go sit, Cara. We finish here." I retreated to the living room where the men had gathered, Marco's father, Franco, holding court about some business deal from the 70s. Marco barely glanced up as I entered, too engrossed in his phone. I'd noticed he did that a lot lately. Endless texts and calls he insisted were just business. My private investigator's report suggested otherwise. There was a woman in New York, someone he'd been seeing for months, someone from a wealthy family with actual liquid assets. "Non può nemmeno parlare di affari," Roberto said, gesturing at me with his espresso cup. "She can't even talk about business." "È meglio così," Marco replied. "It's better that way. Le donne americane parlano troppo quando sanno troppo. American women talk too much when they know too much." Antonio laughed. "Ricordi quella ragazza di Milano che uscivi? Quella sì che sapeva di affari. Peccato che suo padre abbia scoperto I tuoi debiti." "Remember that girl from Milan you were dating? She knew about business. Too bad her father discovered your debts." So there was a pattern. Marco targeted women who could help his failing business. Women he thought he could manipulate or use. The Milan girl's father had clearly been smarter than most. The evening dragged on with more wine, more insults I pretended not to understand, more condescension wrapped in Italian phrases. By the time Marco drove us home to his Back Bay apartment, paid for by his mother, I'd discovered, I was exhausted from maintaining my mask. "They really like you," Marco said as we rode the elevator up. "My mother thinks you're sweet." "That's nice," I replied softly. Sweet. The Italian word Giuliana had actually used was sempliciotta, a little simpleton. Inside the apartment, Marco immediately went to his study, door clicking shut for what I knew would be another hour of business calls. I stood in the living room, looking at the expensive furnishings that didn't quite hide the dated bones of the space. Everything was for show. The designer coffee table book about Italian, architecture that he'd never opened, the wine collection he'd inherited but didn't understand, the abstract art pieces his mother had given him because they matched the sofa. I pulled out my phone and opened my encrypted messaging app. A text from my business partner, Linda, was waiting. Bernardini Import-Export filed for bankruptcy protection last month. They're 3 months behind on warehouse rent. His meeting tomorrow with the Moretti Group? They're pulling their contract. I smiled. The Moretti Group was one of my clients, a Venetian textile company I'd been working with for 2 years. Their CEO, Alessandro Moretti, was someone I'd met in Milan. Someone who'd actually attended my graduation from the Università Bocconi with honors. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just about pulling a contract. It was about revealing exactly who Marco had tried to deceive. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a video call from Rome. I glanced at Marco's study door, still closed, his muffled voice audible through the expensive but poorly insulated walls, and answered. "Ciao, Bella." Francesca's face filled the screen. My best friend from my Florence days, now a curator at the Uffizi Gallery. "Hello, beautiful." "Ciao, Francie," I replied in fluid Italian, keeping my voice low. "Come va?" "How's it going?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Bene, bene. Ho le informazioni che volevi sulla famiglia Bernardini. Good, good. I have the information you wanted about the Bernardini family. For the next 20 minutes, Francesca filled me in on what her connections in Italian society had uncovered. The Bernardini family was known in certain circles, known for their faded glory and their desperate attempts to marry into money. Marco's grandfather had been a legitimate businessman once, but his father, Franco, had squandered most of the fortune on bad investments and maintaining appearances. Marco himself had left Italy under somewhat murky circumstances, something involving a business deal gone wrong, and a wealthy family's daughter who'd ended their engagement when she discovered his mounting debts. "Stai attenta," Francesca warned. "Be careful. Uomini come lui sono pericolosi quando si sentono intrappolati. Men like him are dangerous when they feel trapped." "Lo so," I assured her. "I know. Ma sono pronta. But I'm ready." After hanging up, I sat in the darkened living room, my mind working through the plan that had been forming over the past month. Tomorrow was Saturday. Marco's meeting with the Moretti Group at 10, followed by what he thought would be lunch with potential investors at one of Boston's most exclusive Italian restaurants. He'd actually bragged about the reservation, not knowing I'd been the one to secure it through my connections. What Marco didn't know was that tomorrow would be the day his carefully constructed lies began to unravel. The study door opened, and Marco emerged, running his hand through his dark hair. Sorry, amore. Business is crazy right now. Big deals coming together. It's okay, I said, standing up and stretching. I know you're working hard. He crossed to me, pulling me into an embrace that once might have felt romantic, but now just felt calculated. You're so understanding, not like other women who need constant attention. I trust you, I lied smoothly. That's my good girl, he murmured, kissing my forehead. The patronizing tone made my skin crawl. Hey, tomorrow I have some meetings. Probably best if you entertain yourself. Maybe go shopping? Buy something pretty? Sure, I agreed, playing the compliant girlfriend. Will you be home for dinner? Probably late. Important business dinner. Which was actually dinner with the woman from New York, according to my investigator's latest report. She was arriving in Boston tomorrow evening, staying at the Fairmont. Marco had reserved a suite. Okay, I said with a small, understanding smile. I'll miss you. He kissed me again, already distracted by his phone. You're perfect, you know that? So easy, so sweet, not complicated like Italian women. I bet that's what he'd told the girl from Milan, too. That night, I lay awake in Marco's bed. Our bed, supposedly, though I'd been careful never to fully move in, listening to him snore beside me. My mind was running through tomorrow's timeline, checking and rechecking every detail. The meeting with Moretti Group at 10. Marco arriving to find not just Alessandro Moretti, but also his own family's former business associates from Italy. People who knew the real story of why he'd left Milan. And me, walking in at precisely 10:30, speaking perfect Italian, revealing exactly who I was and what I knew. But that was just the opening move. The real revelation would come later, at the restaurant, in front of the investors he thought he was impressing. Investors who were actually my colleagues and clients, assembled to witness his humiliation. And finally, the evening would conclude with a special surprise I'd arranged with the woman from New York, who'd been very interested to learn she wasn't the only person Marco was deceiving. My phone buzzed silently on the nightstand. A message from my lawyer. All documentation ready. The restraining order is prepared if needed. Security team will be in position by 9 a.m. I might have seemed naive, might have played the unsophisticated American girl, but I hadn't spent 11 years navigating Italian business culture without learning how to protect myself. Every conversation with Marco had been recorded. Massachusetts was a one-party consent state. Every financial document he'd carelessly left around the apartment had been photographed and analyzed. His attempts to access my business information through phishing emails had been documented. And his plans to use me for my connections, revealed so callously in Italian at his family's dinner table, had all been captured on the discreet recording device I'd worn. Some might call it entrapment. I called it due diligence. Marco stirred beside me, mumbling something in Italian. Domani cambia tutto, he muttered in his sleep. Tomorrow everything changes. He had no idea how right he was. I slipped out of bed quietly, padding to the bathroom and closing the door. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. The carefully cultivated image of someone simple, someone forgettable, someone who could be dismissed and mocked in Italian at family dinners. Tomorrow, I would shed this costume and reveal who I really was. My phone showed 2:47 a.m. In 7 hours and 13 minutes, Marco would leave for his meeting with the Moretti Group, confident and clueless. He'd dress in his best suit, the one his mother had bought him last Christmas. He'd rehearse his pitch in the car, practicing his Italian, which was actually quite poor despite his heritage. He'd grown up speaking mostly English, learning Italian as an adult, and his accent betrayed him to any native speaker. I thought about all the moments over the past 6 months where I'd bitten my tongue. The times his family had insulted me in Italian, thinking I was too stupid to understand. The condescending way Marco explained simple concepts to me, as if I were a child. The way he'd tried to access my work computer, my email, my business contacts. The way he'd pushed for a quick engagement, for marriage, for access to everything I'd built. And I thought about my Nonna, gone now for 15 years, who'd taught me that silence could be a weapon more powerful than any argument. Lascia che si credano furbi, she used to say. Let them think they're clever. Poi colpisci quando sono sicuri di aver vinto. Then strike when they're sure they've won. Tomorrow, Marco would be sure he'd won. He'd be celebrating his deception, his clever manipulation of the simple American girl. He'd walk into that meeting room confident that he was about to secure a contract that would save his failing business. He'd smile and shake hands and speak his awkward Italian, never imagining that everyone in that room would know exactly what he was. I splashed water on my face and looked at my reflection again. Tomorrow, this face would be different. Tomorrow, I would walk into that meeting room as Sofia Castellano, my full name, the one I'd used throughout my years in Italy, the one linked to my publications on Renaissance art, my consulting work with fashion houses, my business ownership. Not Sophie, the diminutive American nickname I'd been using with Marco. Not the simple marketing girl from Ohio. The real me. I returned to the bedroom and slid back under the covers, careful not to wake Marco. He snorted once and rolled over, throwing an arm across my waist possessively. Even in sleep, he had to assert control. Dormi pure, I whispered so softly he couldn't possibly hear. Sleep well. Domani ti svegli, in un incubo. Tomorrow you wake up in a nightmare. The morning came too quickly and too slowly all at once. I woke to find Marco already in the shower, humming some bastardized version of an Italian song. I made coffee, proper espresso from his fancy machine that he didn't actually know how to use properly, and set out breakfast, playing the role one last time. "You're up early," Marco said, emerging from the bedroom in his underwear, toweling his hair. "Making breakfast? You're going to make someone a good wife someday." Not you, I thought, but smiled instead. "I wanted to make sure you had a good breakfast before your important meeting." He kissed the top of my head absently, already mentally preparing for his day. That's my girl. Simple pleasures, right? Coffee and a woman who knows her place. I poured him a cup, resisting the urge to pour it over his head. "What time is your meeting?" 10 o'clock. Should be quick. Just signing some papers, really. These Moretti people are desperate for American distribution. They'll take whatever terms I offer. I nearly laughed. Alessandro Moretti, desperate. The man ran one of the most successful textile companies in Europe, with operations in 12 countries and annual revenue in the hundreds of millions. He could buy and sell Marco's entire family history without noticing the expense. "That sounds wonderful," I said instead. "I'm so proud of you." Marco preened, exactly as I'd known he would. Compliments about business acumen were his weakness, probably because deep down, he knew he had none. "Wait until you see the commission from this deal. We'll be able to move out of this place, get something bigger, maybe even get you some nicer clothes. Can't have my wife looking like she shops at Target forever. My Ferragamo shoes would have paid his rent for 3 months, but I just nodded demurely. He dressed carefully, checking his reflection multiple times. I watched him, cataloging everything, the way he adjusted his tie, the cologne he applied liberally, the practiced smile he gave his reflection. This was a man who'd built his entire life on appearances, on the illusion of success. The reality beneath was rotting, but as long as the surface gleamed, he thought he was safe. "Wish me luck," he said at the door, briefcase in hand. "In bocca al lupo," I replied, using the Italian expression for good luck. He looked surprised. "You know Italian?" "Just that phrase," I lied smoothly. "I looked it up. Wanted to surprise you." He smiled indulgently. "That's sweet. Very sweet. See? I knew you had potential. You try so hard." The door clicked shut behind him, and I counted to 60 before moving. Then I was in motion, shedding the casual clothes I'd been wearing for carefully chosen pieces. A tailored Armani pantsuit in deep navy, one I'd bought in Milan 3 years ago. My real Ferragamo heels, the ones I hadn't scuffed or hidden. A silk blouse that cost more than Marco's monthly car payment. I pulled my hair back into a sleek chignon, applied makeup with practiced precision, and added the simple gold jewelry I'd inherited from my nonna. Real gold, 18 karat. Pieces that had been in our family for generations. The transformation took 20 minutes. The woman in the mirror was unrecognizable as the girl who'd eaten dinner with the Bernardinis last night. This woman looked confident, successful, dangerous. This woman looked Italian. I gathered my documents, contracts, recordings, financial statements, all neatly organized in a leather portfolio, and checked my watch. 9:45 a.m. Marco would be arriving at the Moretti Group's temporary Boston offices right about now, probably surprised by how upscale the building was, maybe starting to feel the first flickers of doubt. My phone rang. Alessandro Moretti himself. "Sofia, siamo pronti?" "Sofia, we're ready." "Arrivo tra 10 minuti," I confirmed. "I'll arrive in 10 minutes. "È lì?" "Is he there?" "Appena arrivato. Sembra molto sicuro di sé." "Just arrived. He seems very confident." "Non vedo l'ora di vedere la sua faccia." "I can't wait to see his face." "Anch'io." Me neither. The drive to the office building took exactly 8 minutes. I'd timed it 3 times in the past week, making sure I knew every traffic pattern, every possible delay. I parked in the executive garage, a space Alessandro had reserved for me, and took the private elevator to the 15th floor. The Moretti Group's offices were impressive, all glass and marble and understated luxury. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Buongiorno, Dottoressa Castellano." "Good morning, Dr. Castellano." The title was from my doctoral work in Florence, a PhD in art history that Marco had no idea existed. "Buongiorno, Claudia," I replied warmly. "È nella sala conferenze?" "Is he in the conference room?" "Sì, con il signor Moretti e gli altri." "Yes, with Mr. Moretti and the others." I checked my reflection one last time in the glass wall. Perfect, professional, powerful, and opened the conference room door. The scene inside was exactly as Alessandro had described. Marco sat at one end of the long table, papers spread before him, mid-sentence in his pitch. Alessandro sat at the head of the table, face carefully neutral, and flanking him were 3 other people I'd specifically requested. Carlo Benedetti, who'd been a business partner with Marco's grandfather in Italy before Marco's father had cheated him. Mariella Rossi, the mother of the Milan girl Marco had abandoned when her father discovered his debts. And Giovanni Costa, a lawyer who specialized in international business fraud. Marco's voice died mid-word as I entered. His eyes widened, confusion washing over his face as he tried to reconcile the woman he was seeing with the girlfriend he thought he knew. Sophie? Why are you dressed like... What's happening? Buongiorno a tutti, I said smoothly in Italian, my voice clear and confident. Good morning, everyone. Scusa il ritardo. Sorry I'm late. I watched Marco's face as the meaning of my words registered. The confusion, the dawning realization, the first spike of fear. Alessandro stood, a smile playing at his lips. Dottoressa Castellano, benvenuta. Dr. Castellano, welcome. Stavamo proprio parlando di te. We were just talking about you. Sofia? Marco stammered, his Italian forgotten, his English suddenly uncertain. I don't understand. What's happening? Why are you here? I set my portfolio on the table and took the seat directly across from him, meeting his eyes with a level gaze. Let me explain in a language we can all understand, Marco. Then again, perhaps I should say it in Italian, since you've been so comfortable using it to insult me for months. His face went white. Tu parli italiano? You speak Italian? Parlo italiano meglio di te, I replied coldly. I speak Italian better than you. Vivo in Italia da 11 anni. Firenze, Roma, Milano. Ho lavorato con alcune delle aziende più prestigiose d'Europa. Conosco tutti in questa stanza. E soprattutto, so esattamente chi sei e cosa hai fatto. I lived in Italy for 11 years. Florence, Rome, Milan. I worked with some of the most prestigious companies in Europe. I know everyone in this room. And most importantly, I know exactly who you are and what you've done. The silence in the room was absolute. Marco's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish pulled from water. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Signor Bernardini, Alessandro said, his voice like silk over steel. Vorrei presentarle alcune persone. Mr. Bernardini, I'd like to introduce you to some people. What followed was 20 minutes of systematic destruction. Carlo Benedetti detailed how Marco's father had defrauded his family business, presenting documents that showed the fraud had continued with Marco's knowledge. Mariella Rossi explained how Marco had courted her daughter while hiding massive debts, leaving the girl heartbroken and distrustful when the truth emerged. Giovanni Costa outlined the multiple instances of attempted business fraud, including Marco's current attempt to misrepresent his company's financial situation to secure contracts he couldn't fulfill. Through it all, Marco sat frozen, his earlier confidence evaporated. His eyes kept darting to me, as if hoping this was a nightmare he'd wake from, but I remained perfectly still, perfectly composed, watching his world collapse. Finally, Alessandro turned to me. Dottoressa Castellano, vorrebbe condividere le sue scoperte? Dr. Castellano, would you like to share your findings? I opened my portfolio and slid a document across the table to Marco. This is a transcript of every conversation we've had over the past 3 months, with particular attention to your attempts to access my business information. Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, Marco. I didn't need your permission to record our conversations. His hands trembled as he picked up the document. This, I continued, sliding another document across, is a financial analysis of Bernardini Import-Export, showing your bankruptcy filing and your debts, the same debts you failed to disclose to me. Another document. This is documentation of your relationship with Jennifer Matthews in New York, including hotel receipts, text messages, and photographs. His face had gone from white to gray. And this, I said, placing the final document in front of him, is a recording from your family's dinner last night. Every insult, Every cruel joke, every dismissive comment, all in Italian, all captured, all understood. I stood, buttoning my jacket with careful precision. Vorrei che tutti qui sapessero che non sono io la vittima in questa situazione, I said, addressing the room. I want everyone here to know that I'm not the victim in this situation. Sono una donna d'affari, educata, esperta, che ha scelto di giocare un ruolo per scoprire la verità su quest'uomo. I'm a businesswoman, educated, experienced, who chose to play a role to discover the truth about this man. E ora che la verità è chiara, chiudo questo capitolo della mia vita. And now that the truth is clear, I'm closing this chapter of my life. I looked down at Marco one last time. Your meeting with the supposed investors at lunch? Cancelled. They were my colleagues, assembled to witness your lies. Your dinner tonight with Jennifer Matthews? She'll be there, but so will I. And so will documentation of every lie you've told her about your business, your family, and your relationship status. Your mother's brownstone that you claimed your family owns outright? The bank is foreclosing next month. I know because I was approached about buying it. Apparently, my reputation in Boston's Italian community is better than you realized. I picked up my portfolio and turned to Alessandro. Grazie per la tua ospitalità. Thank you for your hospitality. È stato un piacere, he replied. It was a pleasure. Ceniamo insieme la prossima settimana? Dinner together next week? Con piacere. With pleasure. I walked to the door, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Behind me, I could hear Marco's ragged breathing, the rustle of papers as the others gathered their documents, the scrape of chairs as they prepared to leave. Sophie, wait. Sophia, please. Marco's voice cracked. You don't understand. I can explain. The things I said, my family said, we didn't mean... I paused at the door, looking back over my shoulder. Intendevi ogni parola, I said quietly. You meant every word. E ora devi affrontare le conseguenze. And now you have to face the consequences. What about us? Our engagement? I looked at the ring on my finger, a modest diamond, something he'd probably bought on credit, something he'd presented with such flourish 2 months ago. I slipped it off and placed it on the conference table. There is no us, Marco. There never was. There was only the woman you thought you could use, and the woman I actually am. I suggest you figure out which one of those you can afford to anger, because I promise you, the answer isn't the one you'd like. I left him there, in that conference room, surrounded by the evidence of his deceptions and the people he'd wronged. The elevator ride down felt like shedding skin, like emerging from a cocoon. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing with messages. Linda, did it happen? Tell me everything. Francesca, Alora? So? My lawyer. Saw the recording confirmation. Beautiful work. He won't be bothering you again. But the day wasn't over yet. I still had lunch to cancel formally, dinner to arrange, and a meeting with Jennifer Matthews, who deserved to know the truth about the man who'd been lying to both of us. I drove to my real apartment, not the modest place I'd told Marco about, but my actual home. A beautiful space in the South End with original hardwood floors and a view of the Charles River. Inside, I changed again, this time into something more casual, but still unmistakably expensive. I had 4 hours before dinner, 4 hours to prepare the final act of this drama. My phone rang. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. Sophia? A woman's voice, thick with tears and rage. Sei la fidanzata di Marco? Are you Marco's fiancé? Who is this? Sono Maria Bernardini, sua sorella. I'm Maria Bernardini, his sister. Devo parlarti. Devo dirti quello che ha fatto. Quello che sta facendo alla mia famiglia. I need to talk to you. I need to tell you what he's done. What he's doing to my family. I smiled slowly. Marco had two sisters, Sophia, who'd been at dinner last night, and Maria, who I'd learned lived in California and hadn't spoken to the family in years. Dimmi tutto, I said, settling into my sofa with my notebook. Tell me everything. What Maria told me over the next hour changed everything. Marco wasn't just a con artist and a liar, he was systematically destroying his own family. The brownstone that was in foreclosure. He'd taken out loans against it without his mother's knowledge, using forged signatures. The family business that his father still believed was viable. Marco had been siphoning money from it for years, hiding the losses in creative accounting. Even his sisters hadn't been spared. He'd stolen Sophia's inheritance from their grandmother, money that was supposed to fund her art school education. Ho cercato di avvertire la mamma, Maria said, crying now. I tried to warn Mom. Ma mi ha cacciato di casa. Mi ha detto che ero gelosa del suo bambino perfetto. But she threw me out of the house. She told me I was jealous of her perfect boy. Maria, I said carefully, come ti sentiresti se potessi aiutarti a dimostrare tutto questo? Maria, how would you feel if I could help you prove all of this? There was a long pause. Cosa intendi? What do you mean? Intendo che ho documenti, registrazioni, prove di tutto quello che Marco ha fatto. E intendo che forse è arrivato il momento che la verità venga a galla. Tutta la verità. I mean I have documents, recordings, proof of everything Marco has done. And I mean that perhaps it's time the truth came out. All of it. By the time I hung up with Maria, I had a new plan. One that was bigger than just exposing Marco's lies to me. One that would save his family from his predations and possibly salvage what was left of their business and dignity. But first, I had dinner with Jennifer Matthews. The restaurant was one of the finest Italian establishments in Boston, a place where the staff knew me by name, where the chef often came out to personally discuss the evening's specials with me. I'd eaten there dozens of times during my years traveling between Boston and Italy, had helped the owner source authentic ingredients from my contacts in Italy. Jennifer arrived at 7, exactly as agreed. She was stunning, tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in designer clothes. She was also clearly nervous, twisting her Hermes bag strap between her fingers as she approached the table where I waited. Sophia? She asked hesitantly. Jennifer, please, sit. She sat, eyeing me warily. Your message said this was about Marco Bernardini, about information I needed to know. It is. I slid a folder across the table. Marco and I have been engaged for 2 months. He told me you were a business associate. He told you I was... What exactly? She opened the folder, paling as she looked at the photographs. Marco and me at various locations, the engagement ring clearly visible, dates and times stamped. He said you were his ex, that you were having trouble letting go, that you were unstable. I laughed without humor. Of course he did. Jennifer, I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to show you documents, and then I'm going to let you decide what you want to do with the information. Over the next hour, I told her everything. My background, my deception of Marco as he'd been deceiving me, what I'd discovered about his debts, his lies, his systematic fraud. I showed her documents, played her recordings. I watched her face cycle through disbelief, anger, humiliation, and finally a cold fury that I recognized because I'd felt it myself. He told me he was wealthy, she said finally, voice tight. He showed me properties, businesses. He said he needed my family's investment to expand, but that it was a sure thing. How much did you invest? $200,000, my inheritance from my grandmother. I winced. I'm sorry. Truly. For what it's worth, I think we can recover some of it. I have documentation of where the money went. A good lawyer might be able to— I don't want a lawyer, Jennifer interrupted. I want revenge. I smiled. Then you're in the right place. Because Marco is supposed to meet you here at 8 o'clock, expecting a romantic dinner. He doesn't know I know about you. He certainly doesn't know you know about me. What if we both stayed? Her eyes lit up with understanding. And when he arrives? And when he arrives, we have a conversation. In Italian, if you prefer. I know you speak it. I saw on your LinkedIn that you studied in Rome. Parlo italiano fluentemente, she confirmed. I speak Italian fluently. Questa mi piace. I like this plan. At exactly 8 o'clock, Marco walked into the restaurant. He was dressed even more carefully than he'd been that morning, clearly trying to impress. He'd changed after his disastrous morning meeting, probably gone home to lick his wounds and regroup. He thought he still had Jennifer, still had her money and her family's connections. He thought he could salvage this. He saw Jennifer first, his face lighting up, already moving toward the table. Then he saw me, sitting beside her, and stopped dead. Ciao, Marco, I said pleasantly. Hello, Marco. Vorremmo parlarti. We'd like to talk to you. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, fear, calculation, and finally a desperate attempt at charm. Sophia, this isn't what it looks like. Siediti, Jennifer said coldly, gesturing to the empty chair across from us. Sit down. Marco stood frozen at the restaurant entrance, his face cycling through emotions like a broken slot machine. The maitre d' approached, but I waved him off with a familiar gesture. This was my territory, not Marco's. Siediti, Marco, I repeated, my voice carrying across the quiet restaurant. Sit down, Marco. He approached slowly, like a man walking to his execution. Other diners were beginning to notice the tension at our table. Jennifer sat with her arms crossed, her designer rings catching the light as her fingers drummed against her elbow. She looked magnificent in her fury, a lioness ready to strike. Marco collapsed into the chair, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Sophia, posso spiegare? Sophia, I can explain. No, Jennifer cut him off sharply. Non puoi spiegare niente. Abbiamo già tutti I documenti, tutte le prove, tutte le bugie. No, you can't explain anything. We already have all the documents, all the proof, all the lies. I slid a folder across the table, a different one from what I'd shown Jennifer, this one prepared specifically for this moment. Your morning was difficult, I imagine, learning that the Moretti Group knows exactly who you are. That Carlo Benedetti documented your father's fraud. That Mariella Rossi's daughter never forgot what you did to her. Marco's hands trembled as he opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, transaction records, photographs of him with Jennifer, photographs of him with me, screenshots of text messages, emails to other women, loan applications filled with lies. But that was just the beginning, I continued, switching to English so nearby diners wouldn't understand the full scope of his humiliation. Jennifer, would you like to tell him what you learned today? Jennifer leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. I learned that the lucrative business opportunity you pitched to my family was built on bankruptcy and fraud. I learned that the $200,000 of my inheritance that I invested with you went to pay your personal debts, your gambling losses in Atlantic City, your credit card bills, your mother's mortgage payments. Marco's face went gray. Jennifer, I owe— I also learned, she continued, her voice rising slightly, that I'm not the only woman you've scammed. That in Milan, you did this same thing to Alessandro Moretti's niece. That in New York, before you met me, you convinced a widow to invest her late husband's life insurance in your company. That in Boston, you courted me while engaged to Sophia, and courted Sophia while sleeping with me. The couple at the next table had stopped eating, pretending not to listen, but clearly captivated. I didn't care. This was about truth, about exposure, about making sure Marco could never do this again. Aspetta, Marco stammered, trying to switch to Italian as if that would somehow save him. Wait. Non è come sembra. It's not how it seems. È esattamente come sembra, I said coldly. It's exactly how it seems. È peggio. And worse. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, pressing play on a video file. Marco's face appeared on the screen. From last night, at his family's dinner. The audio was crystal clear. Non è per sempre. Una bella ragazza americana. Facile da gestire. Fra qualche anno, quando avrò quello che mi serve dalla sua azienda, possiamo sempre trovare una soluzione. It's not forever. A pretty American girl, easy to manage. In a few years, when I get what I need from her company, we can always find a solution. Marco reached for the phone, but I pulled it back smoothly. That's not even the best part. Keep watching. The video continued, showing his mother, his brothers, his uncle, all insulting me in Italian, all laughing at the stupid American girl who couldn't understand them. Marco's face on screen was gleeful, superior, cruel. I showed this to several people today, I said quietly. Carlo Benedetti has already shared it with your father's former business associates in Italy. Alessandro Moretti posted it in a private WhatsApp group of Italian business owners in Boston. About 40 people. Your reputation in the Italian community, both here and in Italy, is finished. No, Marco whispered. No, per favore. No, please. But wait, there's more, Jennifer said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. She was enjoying this, and I didn't blame her. Tell him about Maria. Marco's head snapped up. Maria? Mia sorella Maria? My sister Maria? Your sister Maria, I confirmed, called me this morning. After your meeting with the Moretti group, word spread fast. She heard about it from a mutual friend in San Francisco. She told me everything, Marco. About how you forged your mother's signature to take out loans against the brownstone. About how you stole Sophia's inheritance, the money your grandmother left specifically for her art school education. About how you've been systematically bleeding your family's business dry for years. The blood drained from Marco's face completely. He looked like he might be sick. I spent 3 hours this afternoon with Maria on the phone, then on video call. She provided documents, emails, bank statements. She's been gathering evidence for years, hoping someone would finally listen. And now, thanks to your attempt to deceive me, someone is listening. A lot of someones. I pulled out another folder, this one thick with documents. This is everything Maria provided, combined with my own investigation, combined with what Jennifer discovered. It's a complete picture of your fraud. And at 5 o'clock this afternoon, I sent it to 3 people. Your mother, your father, and the district attorney's office. Marco made a sound like a wounded animal. Hai mandato to hai. You. I sent the truth, I said simply. Something you've never been capable of providing. My phone buzzed. A text from Giuliana. Devi venire a casa, subito. You need to come to the house, immediately. I showed Marco the text. Your mother wants to talk, both of us, now. The drive to Beacon Hill was silent. Marco slumped in the back of Jennifer's car. She'd insisted on driving, unwilling to let him out of our sight. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the familiar Boston streets pass by, thinking about how much had changed in just 12 hours. The Bernardini brownstone looked different in the evening light, less impressive than it had seemed last night. Now I could see the weathered paint, the cracked mortar between bricks, the slightly overgrown garden, all signs of a family struggling to maintain appearances. Juliana opened the door before we could knock. Her face was ravaged with tears, her careful makeup smeared, her elegant composure shattered. Behind her, I could see Franco and Sophia in the living room, both looking stunned. "Entrate," Juliana said hoarsely. "Come in." We filed into the living room where, just last night, Marco's friends had mocked me in Italian. The irony was overwhelming. Sophia wouldn't meet my eyes. Franco sat with his head in his hands. On the coffee table, I could see printouts of the documents I'd sent. Evidence of Marco's systematic betrayal of his own family. "È tutto vero?" Juliana asked, looking at me, not at Marco. "Is it all true?" "Sì," I confirmed. "Yes. Mi dispiace che tu debba scoprirlo così. I'm sorry you have to discover it like this." She turned to Marco, and the look on her face was pure devastation. "Come hai potuto? Alla tua famiglia? A tua sorella?" "How could you? To your family. To your sister." Marco tried to speak, but no words came out. What could he say? The evidence was overwhelming, indisputable. Franco finally looked up. "La casa. Prestiti che hai preso. Cosa succederà ora?" "The house. The loans you took out. What happens now?" "That depends," I said carefully. "I've been in contact with a real estate attorney this afternoon. If your family is willing to be transparent about Marco's fraud, if you're willing to cooperate fully with the investigation, there may be ways to protect some of your assets. The brownstone can potentially be saved if you act quickly." Juliana's eyes widened. "Tu ci aiuteresti? Dopo quello che ti abbiamo fatto? Dopo come ti abbiamo trattata? You would help us? After what we did to you? After how we treated you?" "I'm not doing it for you," I said honestly. "I'm doing it for Maria, who's been trying to protect you for years. And for Sophia, who deserves her inheritance. And because no matter how terribly you treated me, no one deserves to have their family destroyed by fraud." Sophia finally spoke, her voice small. "Io non sapevo. Dei soldi della nonna. Non sapevo che Marco li avesse presi." "I didn't know. About grandmother's money. I didn't know Marco had taken it." "I know," I said gently. "That's why I'm offering to help. But there are conditions." Franco straightened. "Quali condizioni?" "What conditions?" "First, Marco faces legal consequences for his actions. No family protection, no covering up. He answers for what he's done." Marco made a protesting sound, but Juliana silenced him with a look that could have melted steel. "Second, the family business gets restructured with proper oversight. Maria comes back into the fold. She's actually studied business management and has been successful in California. She takes over operations." Franco nodded slowly. "Maria è sempre stata la più intelligente di loro." Maria was always the smartest of them. "Third," I continued, looking at Sophia, "your inheritance gets restored. I'm prepared to provide a short-term loan, interest-free, to ensure you can attend the art school you wanted. You pay it back when the family business is stable again." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Perché faresti questo per me?" "Why would you do this for me?" "Because last night, you insulted me in Italian thinking I couldn't understand. Today, I'm choosing to be better than that. Consider it a lesson in what real class looks like." Giuliana sank onto the sofa, weeping openly now. Mi dispiace tanto. Sono stata così crudele, così stupida. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was so cruel, so stupid. You were protecting your son, I said, not unkindly. But now you need to protect your family from your son. There's a difference. The next hour was spent going through documents, making phone calls, setting up meetings with attorneys and accountants. Jennifer, surprisingly, stayed for all of it, her business acumen proving invaluable as we worked through the complex financial situation. Marco sat silent through it all, watching his life dismantle piece by piece. Every so often, he'd try to speak, to defend himself, but his family would shut him down. They'd finally seen him clearly, and they couldn't unsee it. At 9 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Franco answered it, returning with 2 police officers and a woman in a business suit. Mr. Marco Bernardini? One officer asked. Marco stood, his face ashen. See? You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent. I watched as they read him his rights, as they handcuffed him, as they led him toward the door. He looked back once, his eyes meeting mine, and I saw in them a desperate plea for mercy. Hai avuto la tua occasione per la verità, I said quietly. You had your chance for truth. Hai scelto le bugie. Ora vivi con le conseguenze. You chose lies. Now, live with the consequences. The door closed behind them, and the house fell silent except for Sophia's quiet crying and Giuliana's whispered prayers. 2 months later, I sat in a cafe in the North End, the Italian neighborhood of Boston that actually felt like Italy. Across from me sat Maria Bernardini, looking confident and professional in a way she'd never been allowed to be when Marco controlled the family narrative. La casa è salva, she said, smiling. The house is saved. E il business è effettivamente in positivo per la prima volta in 5 anni. And the business is actually in the black for the first time in 5 years. And Sofia? I asked. Inizia la scuola d'arte il mese prossimo. È così felice. She starts art school next month. She's so happy. I sipped my espresso, real espresso, perfectly prepared, and felt something settle in my chest. Justice. Not revenge, because revenge would have meant destroying the entire family. Justice meant holding the guilty accountable while protecting the innocent. E Marco? And Marco? Maria's smile faded. In prigione in attesa del processo. Il suo avvocato dice che probabilmente prenderà da 5 a 7 anni. In jail awaiting trial. His lawyer says he'll probably get 5 to 7 years. Good. Mia madre vuole parlarti, Maria said carefully. My mother wants to talk to you. Vuole scusarsi. Veramente scusarsi. She wants to apologize. Really apologize. I thought about it for a moment. About the woman who'd insulted me in Italian, who'd mocked my clothes and my intelligence, who'd raised a son to be a predator. But also about a mother who'd been deceived, who'd lost her home and her illusions in a single day, who was now trying to rebuild with honesty. Forse, I said, maybe. Ma non oggi. But not today. Maria nodded, understanding. We talked for another hour about business, about art, about Italy. She was planning a trip to Milan to reconnect with some of the family's old business contacts, to rebuild bridges that Marco had burned. I gave her some names, some connections, opening doors that had been closed. When we parted ways, she hugged me tightly. Grazie, she whispered. Thank you. Per tutto. For everything. I walked back through the North End, past restaurants and cafes and shops, hearing Italian spoken around me. This neighborhood had been Marco's territory, or so he'd thought. But now it was clear. He'd been a pretender, someone who wore Italian heritage like a costume without understanding its depth, its culture, its values. Real Italian culture valued family, valued honor, valued honesty in business dealings. Marco had betrayed all of it. My phone buzzed. Alessandro Moretti. Cena stasera? Ho una proposta di lavoro per te. Dinner tonight? I have a job proposal for you. I smiled. Life was moving forward. The revenge story was over. Now came the next chapter. As for Jennifer, she'd gotten her money back. Most of it anyway. Marco's arrest had frozen his assets, and with proper legal representation, she'd been able to recover her investment. She'd sent me a text last week. Drink soon? I think we make a good team. We did make a good team. Two women who'd refused to be victims, who'd turned the tables on a con artist, who'd found power in honesty and solidarity. I reached my car, parked on a quiet street lined with brownstones similar to the Bernardinis. But these were well-maintained, loved, cared for by families who valued what they had. The Bernardini house would look like this soon, I thought. With Maria running things, with Sophia's artistic eye helping to restore it, with Franco and Giuliana finally facing reality. As I drove home, I thought about my nonna, about her lessons in silence and strategy. Lascia che si credano furbi, she'd always said. Let them think they're clever. Poi colpisci quando sono sicuri di aver vinto. Then strike when they're sure they've won. I'd done exactly that. And in doing so, I'd revealed not just Marco's lies, but a larger truth. That real power doesn't come from deception or manipulation. It comes from knowledge, from strategy, from the patience to let fools reveal themselves. Marco had thought he was clever, speaking Italian to mock me, using his heritage as a weapon. He'd never imagined that I understood every word, that I spoke his language better than he did, that I'd lived his culture more deeply than he ever had. In the end, his arrogance had been his downfall. Mine had been his education. 6 months after Marco's arrest, I received a letter. It was from him, from the correctional facility where he awaited trial. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Sophia, it began in English. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand, I never meant to hurt you. I was desperate and I made terrible choices. Please, if you have any compassion, any mercy, speak to the prosecutor. Ask them to reduce the charges. My family needs me. My mother is sick. Sophia needs her brother. I'm begging you. I read it twice, then placed it in a folder with all the other documentation from this saga. Then I sat down and wrote my own letter. Marco, I wrote, you're right that you have no right to ask anything of me. But I'll answer your question anyway. Your mother isn't sick. She's actually healthier now than she's been in years, now that the stress of maintaining your lies is gone. Sophia doesn't need her brother. She needs her inheritance, which she now has. Your family doesn't need you. They need honesty, stability, and a chance to heal from the damage you caused. You say you never meant to hurt me, but hurt isn't measured by intention. It's measured by action. You intended to use me. You intended to mock me. You intended to access my business, my connections, my resources for your own benefit. The only thing you didn't intend was to get caught. I have no mercy for you, Marco, but I have something better. I have justice. You're facing the legal consequences of your choices. Your family is rebuilding without you. The women you deceived are moving forward with their lives. And I am exactly where I always was, successful, educated, powerful, fluent in the language you used as a weapon against me. In Italian, there's a saying, Chi semina vento, raccoglie tempesta. He who sows the wind reaps the whirlwind. You sowed deception and mockery. Now you reap the consequences. I won't be writing again, but I'll leave you with this. The next time you try to mock someone in a language you think they don't understand, remember that knowledge is power, and underestimating people is the fastest way to lose everything. Addio, Marco. Buona fortuna con il resto della tua vita. Ne avrai bisogno. Goodbye, Marco. Good luck with the rest of your life. You'll need it. I sealed the letter and sent it. Then I deleted his contact from my phone, threw away the modest clothes I'd worn to play my role, and made a reservation at my favorite Italian restaurant, the real one, where they knew me as Dottoressa Castellano, where I could speak Italian freely, where I belonged. That evening, sitting at a corner table with Alessandro Moretti discussing business opportunities in Milan, I felt the final weight lift from my shoulders. The revenge was complete. The story was over. And I was free to be exactly who I'd always been. A woman who spoke Italian, who understood culture and business, who refused to be diminished by anyone's expectations. Marco had thought he could mock me in Italian. Instead, he'd taught me the most valuable lesson of all. That silence can be strategic, that patience is powerful, and that the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's truth. A cosa stai pensando? Alessandro asked. What are you thinking about? I smiled, raising my wine glass. Al futuro, I said. About the future. E a quanto è dolce la vittoria quando arriva dalla verità. And about how sweet victory is when it comes from truth. We toasted, and I took a sip of the excellent Barolo he'd ordered. Somewhere across the city, Marco sat in a cell, facing the consequences of his deception. His family was healing, rebuilding, learning to value truth over appearances. And I was, here, in my world, speaking my language, living my truth. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about revelation. Revealing yourself, revealing the truth, revealing that the person they underestimated was actually the most dangerous player in the game all along. Fine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.